Welcome back to the channel. This is Cyber Vault and I am Sridhar. In today's world, power is no longer defined only by armies, weapons, or borders, it is defined by information. There are no soldiers on the ground, no gunfire, no explosions, and no visible battlefield, yet influence, control, and strategic advantage are being exercised every single day, quietly, digitally, and often invisibly. Nations no longer need guns, bombs, or invasions to track movements, apply pressure, or shape outcomes. They do it through data, devices, and failures in information security. This is not a traditional battlefield victory, it is a digital one, a form of conflict fought silently using the very technologies we rely on every day. Today's video is not about politics, blame, or conspiracy. It is about information security, and why, in the modern era, it has become one of the most critical pillars of national power, personal privacy, and global influence. Chapter 1: The Death of Physical Power. For decades, power was defined by physical presence and visible strength. Borders were guarded, bunkers were reinforced, weapons were stockpiled, and leaders were surrounded by layers of security. Governments operated on a simple belief: if the leader could be protected physically, the nation itself would remain secure. That belief shaped national security strategy for generations. But in the digital era, that rule has quietly collapsed. Modern leaders no longer exist only in physical space. They exist inside digital systems. Every day, they are connected, directly or indirectly, to smartphones, messaging platforms, email services, travel booking systems, financial networks, and diplomatic communication tools. Each interaction leaves behind a trace. Not always a message. Not always readable content. But metadata. And metadata is persistent, silent, and continuous. Even when a leader avoids social media, never sends emails personally, and never makes direct phone calls, their digital footprint still forms. It forms through staff accounts, through travel logistics, through scheduling systems, and through cloud-connected devices. In today's world, secrecy is no longer broken only by human intelligence or physical surveillance. It is broken by infrastructure itself. Venezuela, like many nations, relied heavily on global digital platforms it did not fully control, platforms optimized for efficiency and global connectivity, not for absolute confidentiality. This dependency created invisible exposure points that no physical security perimeter could see. Imagine a leader who remains completely silent online. Yet their staff uses global email services. Their flights pass through international airline databases. Their hotels rely on centralized booking systems. Their devices synchronize automatically with cloud services. The leader may say nothing, but the digital ecosystem speaks constantly on their behalf. And when systems speak continuously, silence no longer protects. In the digital age, you can protect the body, but if you don't protect the data, the leader is already exposed. Chapter 2: How Data Breaches Become Intelligence. One of the biggest misunderstandings about data breaches is the belief that they are only dangerous when names, passwords, or private messages are exposed. That assumption is fundamentally wrong. Intelligence agencies do not need identities spelled out in plain text. What they need are patterns. A single dataset may look harmless on its own, but intelligence is built by connecting fragments. Imagine an airline database leak. The data never says, "This flight carries a senior Venezuelan official." Instead, it quietly reveals repeated seat blocks, identical travel dates, diplomatic routing, priority clearance codes, and escort reservations. On their own, these details seem ordinary. Together, they begin to form a signal. Now combine that airline data with hotel booking leaks, passport vendor exposures, telecom roaming metadata, and banking transaction timestamps. Suddenly, analysts can determine who travels together, how often certain individuals move, which cities matter, which routes repeat, and which locations carry strategic importance. This process is known as pattern-of-life intelligence. What makes this especially powerful is that no direct intrusion is required. There is no phone hacking, no malware deployment, no spyware installed on a device. The intelligence emerges purely through correlation. One data breach creates noise. Multiple breaches, layered together, create clarity. A simple real-world analogy makes this easier to understand. Google does not read your messages to predict traffic. It watches movement patterns. Intelligence agencies operate in the same way. They don't need to see what is being said. They need to understand how and when people move. Data breaches don't expose secrets, they expose behavior. And behavior is intelligence. Chapter 3: Digital Dependence and Legal Power. Now we arrive at an uncomfortable truth. Most people assume that intelligence dominance is built on surveillance alone. In reality, it is built on something far more powerful: ownership of the digital ecosystem itself. Look at the tools used across the world, even by nations that politically oppose the United States. Smartphones run on American-designed hardware and operating systems. Search queries flow through American platforms. Email, maps, messaging applications, cloud backups, and analytics services are overwhelmingly controlled by US-based companies. The devices may be in another country, but the infrastructure behind them is not. Because these companies operate under US jurisdiction, the digital ecosystem carries legal weight. In 2018, the United States passed the Cloud Act, a law that allows US authorities to legally request data from American technology companies. This applies even when the user is not American, even when the user lives in another country, and even when the data is stored outside the United States. This process does not require hacking. It does not involve breaching encryption. It is lawful access. The most critical detail is often misunderstood. Authorities do not need the content of messages. They need metadata. Metadata reveals when an account was accessed, how IP addresses change, what device fingerprints are present, how locations are estimated, which Wi-Fi or cell towers are nearby, and when cloud synchronization events occur. From this information alone, analysts can infer location, movement, and behavioral habits with high confidence. This creates what can only be described as digital gravity. Once you operate inside the ecosystem inevitably observes you. And this is where the United States quietly secured a decisive digital advantage long before any visible confrontation occurred. A simple example makes this clear. You can encrypt WhatsApp messages. But you cannot encrypt when you logged in, where your device connected from, which network carried the traffic, or when backups synchronized. The words may be protected, but the existence of activity is not. Encryption protects words. Ecosystems expose existence. Chapter 4: How Tracking Becomes Predictive. Now, when all the pieces are combined, the picture becomes clear. Imagine a senior Venezuelan leader operating in the modern world using a smartphone, relying on cloud-synced services, communicating through encrypted messaging apps, traveling internationally, and interacting with multiple third-party vendors. Even with strong encryption enabled, this environment produces a continuous stream of digital signals. Intelligence analysts do not rely on a single source. They aggregate cloud metadata, airline data leaks, telecom roaming records, application synchronization timestamps, and historical movement patterns. Individually, none of these datasets provide precise location information. There is no exact GPS pin. But together, they deliver something far more valuable than precision: they deliver prediction. From these combined signals, analysts can identify high-confidence zones rather than exact points. A city, a district, a cluster of buildings, a specific time window. In intelligence operations, that level of certainty is sufficient. This is how tracking becomes inevitable rather than aggressive. Physical security reacts after movement occurs. Digital intelligence predicts movement before it happens. And in strategic environments, prediction always wins. A familiar real-world example helps explain this. Netflix does not know exactly what you will watch next. But it predicts your behavior with enough accuracy to shape your choices. Intelligence agencies operate in the same way, only the stakes are far higher. The most dangerous target is not the one being watched. It's the one being predicted. Chapter 5: When Oil, Cyber, and Data Collide. Before cyber attacks disrupt systems, before sanctions tighten, and long before any public announcement is made, intelligence almost always begins with economic data. In the digital age, national power is measured not only by military strength, but by visibility into resources, trade flows, and financial intent. Venezuela's case is a clear example of how economic exposure precedes strategic pressure. Well before 2025, Venezuela experienced multiple data exposure events across energy vendors, oil logistics partners, shipping databases, financial intermediaries, and trade documentation systems. These were not always headline-making breaches, and many were never formally acknowledged. Yet even partial leaks were enough to reveal something critical: economic intent. Intelligence does not require perfect datasets. It requires direction. Oil, in this context, is far more than fuel. It represents political leverage, sanctions resistance, currency power, and diplomatic influence. Through fragmented but consistent data exposure, analysts could estimate oil reserves, production capacity, storage limits, export dependency, and shipping bottlenecks. When these variables are visible, a nation's strategic flexibility becomes measurable. One of the most sensitive signals intelligence agencies monitor is currency behavior. Long before any country publicly declares that it will move away from the US dollar, warning signs appear quietly inside data systems. Changes emerge in trade settlement metadata, clearing mechanisms, bilateral payment routes, and non-dollar oil contracts. These indicators surface months, sometimes years, before official statements. This is how intent is detected before policy is announced. The cyber dimension of this exposure has a long history. As early as 2002, cyber sabotage during the PDVSA strike sharply reduced oil output. In 2017, government systems were breached amid internal unrest. In 2020, Venezuelan authorities publicly arrested officials accused of leaking sensitive oil data. These events established a pattern. Energy infrastructure and economic data have long been high-value targets. That context makes the events of December 13 to 15, 2025 especially significant, when PDVSA's administrative and export systems were disrupted by a cyber attack. The objective was not to steal oil. It was to disrupt confidence. And in global markets, confidence moves prices faster than missiles ever could. The most dangerous data breach is not the one that reveals what a nation has. It's the one that reveals what a nation plans to do next. Final, what we must learn from this. This story is not really about Venezuela. It is about everyone living inside the modern digital world. If entire governments can be mapped, pressured, and predicted through data exposure, then the same logic applies to individuals as well. CEOs, military officers, journalists, activists, and even security professionals all leave digital trails. And those trails can be collected, correlated, and analyzed. Data breaches do not merely leak information. They erase anonymity. And once anonymity collapses, power shifts. Control no longer belongs solely to those with weapons or authority, but to those who can see patterns, predict behavior, and act before events unfold. In the 21st century, wars rarely begin with explosions. They begin with log files. Leaders are no longer captured by soldiers on battlefields. They are captured by their own digital footprint built quietly, daily, through the systems they rely on. This is cyber vault. And this is the invisible war of information security.